I think people are coming in. Matt, you got first question goes to you.
Well, that's from my Tether colleague, Lori. Vegas
Oh.
is great. I actually, as people coming in, we met a couple of book club members in person. I was just telling Scott about this. That was cool. I'm zooming in from my hotel room at Harrah's, and the CCW has been a great event. It was different this year, obviously. Attendance was down for sure. And the masking and social distancing requirements, so the show floor feels a little bit different, but it was good to see everyone again, and it was good to be back at a customer service event in person versus virtual. Yeah. Not there's anything wrong with virtual. This virtual book club is wonderful. But
I think virtual book clubs are perfect. It's the conferences that are just a little challenging.
It's a little rough, yeah. But it was cool. I mean, this is, I think, the first big conference I've been to since COVID, and I've been to a few smaller company specific events, but the big events have all been virtual that I've been a part of until this one. So this was the first big show, more than 1,000 attendees, and I think talking to people who are there, great companies, wonderful, a ton of leaders here. The sessions have been going well. We did a session yesterday, just for folks as they join, session yesterday with a customer of ours from MetTel, this Metropolitan Telecommunications, a telco company. And we talked about a lot of the things we're going to talk about today, actually, around effort reduction and how do you get started on that journey, and some change management insights. So I feel better equipped even than I did before this, having had that session. There were some great ideas that our customer shared with us. So
very cool. Well, let's give folks another minute. It looks like we're going to have maybe a little bit lower attendance than normal, which is all right. I think particularly because in a second we're going to talk about how this will be a bit more interactive, hopefully, than previous sessions. But as we all know, as we get closer to the holidays, it does get a little tougher to
it's a
tough
tough
time for these things.
I also say, Scott, there were a lot of people, the people I talked to at CCW, a number of whom have been telling us they've been taking advantage of the recordings with their team. So I ran into 3 leaders from an insurance company who did not know about book club, and we were telling them about it, and they're like, oh boy, we missed it. But the nice thing is they said, no, you guys can still do this on your own and just follow the recordings. So we'll have those, and definitely encourage folks if your team has missed sessions, or look, if you came as a single person from your organization and you'd like to get your team involved, like there's no, it's only a rerun for you, not for them. So use the recordings.
Very good point. And the other thing I throw out there is we got some feedback from folks who were saying they were loving it and want to know, hey, what are we going to do in the future? Are we going to do anything similar? Whatever, we can talk about that maybe at the end of the book club. But I guess for the moment, why don't we officially get started? I'll say good morning to you.
Thank you.
Everybody else out there, afternoon, evening.
I think I'm still on East Coast time. So,
well, I hope you had a nice lunch. As always, Scott Rothman and Matt Dixon. Matt's coming to you obviously live from Las Vegas. Thanks everyone for joining us for the 6th and final session of the official Effortless Experience Book Club. Matt was talking a little bit earlier. We're going to be covering Customer Effort Score and Making Effortless Stick, 2 chapters from the book. And this session, it's going to be a little different than previous sessions, simply because we're going to cover a whole bunch of topics today. So it's either going to be a really short session, or it's going to be a really long session, depending on the engagement here, because we're going to be talking about things like measurement, change management, skills, all of those things that you have to have in order to make Effortless stick. So to kick things off, before Matt, I kind of have you chime in here, I want to throw something out to the group and ask a favor. And I would love for everyone on the line to populate the chat with the question you have around ensuring Effortless sticks, right? What's the one thing that's been top of mind for you as you have been on this journey with us, as you read the book, as you've been on your own journey, right? The number one question I get, if you saw my LinkedIn post all the time, is, hey, this is really cool, but how do I make sure this sticks? How do I make sure this isn't the flavor of the day? And so we're here to address all that. And if you can, I'd love to have you populate the chat with those questions. And Matt, I'll let you chime in here.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Scott. And I think, as Scott said, this one's gonna be a little bit different. We don't have a lot of materials to share. I'll share a couple of slides here in a moment. What I'd like to do, what I'd like to do early on is just recap a little bit. We talked several book clubs ago, I think, about how do you get started. So if we think about making it stick, I think before we talk about making it stick, let's talk about refresh on how to get started. There were two things we talked about earlier on. And the first one we're going to talk about here in a moment, which is you got to measure effort. So you've got to understand, where is effort happening, what's causing it. And the reason we do that is twofold. There's the old adage, of course, what you measure gets managed, right? Or you can't manage what you can't measure. And that's true of effort as well. And so the measurement allows us to baseline, and it allows us to track success over time. So it's a very important component of this. The other reason it's really important, and I really want to impress upon all the practitioners here, is I think oftentimes in service, we dive on the grenade, we make the diving catch, and we run after those problems that are, somebody was telling me yesterday here at CCW, they feel like they're constantly putting out brush fires, and they're not being thoughtful in their prioritization. They've got limited resources and bandwidth to go after fixing things in customer service. We all know there's lots of opportunities to fix the customer experience and fix the service experience, but where should you start? And measurement allows us to size opportunities and to prioritize those opportunities so that we get away from, running after to put out the brush fire because one very upset customer sent a nasty letter to the CEO or said something mean about us on Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn, right? And so it's a really important discipline, and we're going to talk about how to do that. The other thing we're not going to talk as much about, but I mentioned earlier to folks on it in the vein of how to get started, is maybe a counterintuitive place, but a really important place early on. If measurements first, the fast follower to that is improve the agent experience. So you've got to focus on what's getting in the agent's way. We talked about this in the last session, actually, in a lot of detail, but we've got to be really thoughtful about how are we making the job hard for our people, because our data shows, other data shows, there is a direct linkage between the employee experience and the customer experience. And so if our employees are experiencing a high effort workplace, a high effort job, they're not going to be able to translate that into a low effort customer experience when that customer reaches out for help. So we've got to be all over that. We've got to be understanding where are we creating these friction points for our people, and how do we clear the road so they can deliver a low effort experience. But with that, let me take us over to, I want to share a couple of slides on the measurement piece.
And keep the questions coming. We'll get to those in just a second. We got a couple in here, Matt, that are
okay, cool. Great.
That are good questions and applicable to what you were just talking about.
Okay, awesome. Can you guys see the slides?
All good.
Okay, great. Just a couple of real quick ones. So measurement. There's a couple of things I want to say about measurement. What's funny to me is, in retrospect, when we wrote the article in HBR, Stop Trying to Delight Your Customers, and even with the book, I think in many respects, and Scott, I think you probably see this too, there are a lot of people who don't know about effortless experience. They don't know there's a book about this, but they have heard of the customer effort score. And I think part of the reason is that we, practitioners and those of us in CX and customer service, we love metrics. We love measurement. We what we really love? We love the silver bullet. That's what we love the most. We love that, that's why I think, other than NPS is a wonderful idea, is a great concept, I think it's part of the reason Fred Reichheld sold so many books when he called it the ultimate question. And in his HBR article, the one question you need to answer, or you need to ask to understand customer loyalty, it's a very alluring and compelling thing. What I will tell you is, and we talk about this in the book, we learned early on that, religious debates about metrics are unproductive and they're not helpful to practitioners and to leaders. And so our sincere advice is, you've got to measure a lot of things. If you want to understand where effort is coming from, you want to improve the service experience. If you're looking at it from a survey-based perspective, I'm going to talk about customer effort score here in a moment. But if you're looking at it from a survey-based perspective, you gotta really triangulate. And so it's usually a combination of metrics that are the most predictive. In our own research, we found that the combination of loyalty or advocacy at the high level, so a question like Net Promoter, how likely are you to recommend our company or our product to another, a friend, a family member, a colleague, et cetera, a neighbor. Two, the effort of this interaction. So how easy was it for you to get your problem resolved? How easy was it for you to find what you're looking for on the website? How easy was it for you to shop in our store, check in for your flight, whatever it is, ease of that experience or that transaction. And the last question is satisfaction, but it's not satisfaction the way that we've historically asked it, satisfaction with the experience or satisfaction with the company. And what has become popular too is satisfaction with the agent. You know, how satisfied were you with this person who handled your issue? It's satisfaction with the outcome. How satisfied are you with what you got, what the answer was? Those three questions, advocacy or loyalty at the high level around the brand or the company, effort of the interaction, satisfaction with the outcome, together prove to be remarkably predictive of loyalty. The problem, of course, is that companies don't have not a lot of real estate on these surveys. And the more questions we ask, the fewer survey responses we get back, at least fewer complete ones we get back. Now, I do want to talk about customer effort score here for a moment. We came up with a measure based on the research that is a survey-based metric. It is a question. You see, we call it customer effort score 2.0. The reason is, I think, as we talk about in the book, that there was a lot of confusion about the original articulation that was in the HBR article, which was how much effort did you put forth to resolve your request. I'll tell you, effort as a word is sometimes hard to translate in certain languages. The other thing is it comes across as a little bit accusatory, which people didn't really like. So, it's a little bit like when I asked my wife, where the milk is in the refrigerator, and she's like, "Did you really look for it?" And the answer, of course, is no. But it's like, did you try before you? So sometimes it can give that vibe off to our customers. So people don't really like the original articulation. The biggest problem with it, though, was it ran on a reverse scale. So 5 was high effort, 1 was low effort. So 1 was really good, 5 was really bad. But if you think about a customer filling out a post-call survey or a post-chat survey or post-website survey, they kind of get into like response, like it was good, so 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. It was bad, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. And they trips them up to see reverse scales in the thing, or they don't even think about it. So you end up with a false positive or false negative effect, a higher percentage of the time than we like. So we changed the question to this one. We tested it with data, and it works quite well. The company made it easy for me to handle my issue, and it runs on a similar scale to what many of us use in our surveys, from strongly disagree to strongly agree. By the way, I noticed this. There's a typo here. There's a somewhat disagree, which is missing. So I need to go back and go with the version in the book. But my version of my keynote slide is not the one you should use. But it's a similar scale. So what it does is it fits into it creates more spread in the responses. It's phrased in a way that people understand, and it is aligned to the other statements and things we ask our customers to respond to. So if they're giving us a high score, the good answer is all the way on the right, the bad answer is all the way on the left, right? A 1 is bad, a 7 is good. Okay, so we know it's great as a predictive indicator. So lower left is a great way to spot where high effort is happening. It's very predictive from that standpoint. And for those of you who are net promoter shops, remember the story of effort is about mitigating disloyalty. In net promoter terms, what we're talking about is reducing the number of detractors. That's really what we want to focus on, because we know service interactions create a lot of distractors. And the customer effort score aligns very closely as a way to predict or identify likelihood of being detractors. You see here, 67% of detractors on an NPS scale also report that they had high effort experience, compared to 4% on the low effort of customers who had a low effort experience. So it's great alignment. So your CMO can tell you, and this is why we should have religious debates. Or your CEO says your bonus on net promoter score, we care about net promoter score. And you say, that's awesome. We're going to use the effort score because I know that effort, if we can reduce effort, it makes the outcome on net promoter better. So you're not arguing with that. Awesome focal point for the company, but you're able to measure the thing at your level in a more meaningful way. And even folks like Fred Reichheld would tell you, net promoter score was never designed to be a measure of transactional loyalty. So how likely are you to recommend the company or product based on this service experience? It doesn't really work as well in that environment. It's a big question. There's a lot of noise there, right? What I think of your product and your pricing, your competitors, your brand, your stores, your airplanes, like whatever it is, whatever industry is, what I thought about this service interaction. It's all scooped up in NPS. And so effort is a much better indicator at a transactional level when coupled, and there's a clear kind of tie-in here. Now, Scott, I'll go to you. See, you have any thoughts about customer effort score? I'll tell you, but I'll tip my mid a little bit here. I do want to tell you a little bit about some of the work we've been doing at Tether, mainly because the biggest shortcoming of CES is not the question. The biggest shortcoming is the platform that the question gets asked and answered on, which is surveys, which customers just are not filling out the way they once did. And so we're going to talk about some alternative ways to assess effort that don't require surveys. But Scott, any thoughts from you before we go on?
So I was going to go in the direction that our last question tackles, right? And so I'll share some thoughts and I'll read the question. But we do get there's a lot of conversation around, hey, how do we introduce customer effort score? How do we add this to our scorecard or add this to our survey and so on? I think that builds on, it's Andrew's question in here, right? Can you share perspective, advice on how to migrate internal teams and external clients from a familiar CSAT score to an effort score? Yep. And I'll tell you, one of the things that we often find, Matt, is it comes down to the familiarity of the metric. Meaning, if you go talk to a board, probably any board, they will tell you, oh no, we know CSAT. Yeah, we got a sense of NPS. And then you mention effort and they go, wait, what is that one? And so the struggle I think a lot of organizations run into is there is familiarity at the CXO level, meaning any sort of CXO, not necessarily customer experience, the CXO level and the board level with the metrics that we've measured forever, Net Promoter Score and CSAT. There's just a comfort level there. And introducing something new is I think, a challenge. The other thing that I'll mention on that front is, and now I'm completely blanking, of course, shoot.
Scott, I think to your point, there's a little bit of like measurement inertia that happened. Yeah. And I don't think, look, there are a lot of companies I talk to who don't like the metrics they use, but they're familiar, they're baked into operating, cadence, or baked into bonus plans, and they become very hard to undo. I think customer efforts is similar to any other metric, which is once you're chasing a number, you're kind of missing the point, which is it's an indicator of things you're doing well and things you're doing badly. And chasing a number, whether it's effort, whether it's CSAT or NPS, is not what any leadership team can do, or should do, but it's something we all fall victim to, I think, from time to time. Sorry, go ahead.
No, sorry, thank you. That's basically where I was going. The reference was the CSAT in the chat, and I think we can pick it up there, but it does apply to almost every metric. We do get a lot of questions. I do have a lot of conversations around, will Effortless improve CSAT or Net Promoter Score and so on? And we get in this conversation around CSAT. And I've made jokes that, listen, it seems like everybody and their brother and their sister has a high CSAT score these days, right? And the question that we've started to ask is, okay, well, tell me a little bit more about why you're measuring this metric, not just CSAT, but any of the metrics, because we try to get a sense of the entire dashboard. And it's exactly what you just mentioned, which is we've been measuring things. Why? Because they've just always been there. And it's been a long time since we've questioned, why are we still measuring this? Yeah. Why is this SLA the way it is? It's typically, hey, it's 2% more than it was last year. It was 2% more than the year before. And then on top of that, what you tend to find is it's more, I don't want to say it's easy, but it is more likely that you're going to add a metric to a dashboard than you are going to remove a metric from a dashboard. Yeah. That's more of a general kind of dashboard and measurement conversation, but sorry, I cut you off.
No. I think that's really well said. The other thing I would suggest for folks who are looking or, thinking about adding this as a potential replacement, I think the way to think about it is, it's like near us in the DC area, they were building a new bridge near us, and they didn't blow up the old bridge and then start building a new bridge. They left the old bridge in place, built the new bridge next to it, tested it, structural engineers did their thing, and then they opened it, and then they're slowly dismantling the old one. But it's similar, right? If we're a CSAT shop or an NPS shop and we want to move away from those things, I'm not advocating that you do that, but if we wanted to, then leave them running, introduce this new metric, and you'll answer your own questions about whether it's a better indicator. Does it affect these other things? And does it render obsolete or unnecessary those other things? So I wouldn't shut them off right away and flip over to this in any scenario. And we're the ones who came up with this. So would not recommend that. Now, as I said before, I think the bigger problem is that people don't fill out surveys the way they once did. Yeah. And so one of the things that really quickly we've been working on at Tether is, Yeah, somebody said to me years ago, hey, did it ever dawn on you that asking a customer how much effort the experience was after they just had a high effort experience is itself a high effort experience? And I was like, huh, that's a really good point. So, so with that, and the truth is, we never really had a good answer for that, but technology has actually addressed a lot of this. There's so much data we all capture: call recordings, chat interactions, email interactions, case management data in like a Zendesk or Service Cloud. We're collecting all of this conversational data. Shouldn't we be able to use modern technology to teach machines to find the effort level of an experience and what was causing it? And so that's what we built at Tether. And so I just want to share this really quickly with you. If there's interest in learning more, let me know. We'd be happy to talk to you about it. One of the things that our team's really proud of, we built at Tether, is called the Tether Effort Index. Tether Effort Index, think about this as a machine-generated effort score. So take a raw conversation, a phone call, a chat, a case management interaction, an email exchange. And what this is the machine saying, here is the score a customer would have given on the survey, but without you having to ask the customer to fill out a survey. Now, that, other than just being kind of cool, is really powerful from a management standpoint. Now, to be clear, how this is working, it's not looking, the way we do it at least, we don't look for voice inflection or tonal sentiment. So customers raising their voice, they're clearly experiencing high effort. You can pick up that anger and that tonality from the audio. We're actually looking at syntax. So we're looking at all the things we know based on the research create effort. When customers talk about channel switching, when they talk about we can tell they're repeating themselves. And often customers will say, this is the third time I've had to tell you guys this. We can track repeat contacts. Because why? Because customers say, this is the second or third time I've had to call about this. We can track different language techniques, hiding behind policy, advocacy, positive and negative language, proactive guides, all the stuff we know reduces or increases effort from an agent standpoint. We can capture all of that stuff because it's all right there in the conversation. And the way we built this is we worked with a number of companies where we had their phone calls, their chats, we had all that unstructured data, and we also had the customer effort score the customer gave on the interaction as the dependent variable. And we built an algorithm which has something like 8,600 independent variables, where that all together predict what the effort score would have been. Now, our score works on a 0 to 10 scale. The way you think about it is anything from 0 to 4 is very high effort. Anything from 7 to 10 is awesome. It's really low effort. And then there's a lot that falls in between. And again, other than just being kind of cool, it's useful. And here's why. It's a very practical tool for leaders. We like to talk about kind of the ABCs of using this score. The first one is it's super powerful from an agent standpoint. So think about the way we do QA today, the way we coach our people. It's based on small sample size call listening, manual call listening. In this world, what we're doing is we're assigning an effort score. And we also have a second score, by the way, which it's called the agent impact score. That assesses the agent's specific contribution, because sometimes it'll be a low effort experience, but some of the stuff the agent did made it higher effort than it needed to be. Or conversely, it was a really high effort experience, but were it not for an awesome job by the agent, it could have been a worse outcome. So you'll see sometimes that the effort score does not actually match to the agent score because of that swing effect I just talked about. But when we have this metric and we're using it across 100% of interactions, it's a lot fairer for our agents, because not the 2 calls you're listening to and you happen to listen to the 2 worst calls I did that week, or that month. It's 100% sample size. It's unbiased as well. And what that allows us to do is to get really focused in on what matters, not arguing about limited sample size and whether we pick the right call to evaluate in QA, but looking at the body of work and then focusing in on what they could have done differently and showing the metrics, say, look, this was not a bad interaction, but your effect on it was actually pretty negative, or this was a really awful interaction, but you made it a lot better because of a great way you handled it. And what's, I think, powerful about that is not only does it allow us to focus in on, if you're going to go out and tell your people to use advocacy and you're going to invest in that training and that coaching, how do you know if they're doing it or not if you're only listening to 1% of your calls? So you want to know that your people are using those skills and those behaviors and they're getting good at this stuff, because that allows you to do refresher training and targeted coaching for those who aren't. At the same time, it also allows you to identify what good sounds like. And I think one of the things that reps often struggle with, Scott, we'll go to you in a moment. We talk about the coaching piece in the agent experience. You're making this stick with the agent level. Is sometimes they struggle a little bit with what does this sound like in my job? And when you have a machine identifying usage of this, and you can show them, hey, you used advocacy and it had this great outcome. And then we could tell all the new hires, hey, we're talking about advocacy. This is not a generic concept. Let me play for you a call in which one of our best reps used advocacy and watch what happened. And it just makes it so much more concrete than these kind of general role play, training scenarios. The second thing is on the business side. So the B is business. What this allows us to do is identify what are the call reasons, or maybe it's the products or the things, maybe something about the digital experience that drive high effort that we need to work with our business partners to eliminate. Now, those are sometimes and oftentimes not things that we are responsible for. They're not things the agent has responsibility for. The agent's just cleaning it up after the fact. But it might be that the website is misdirecting customers. It might be that there's an issue with authentication on the app. It might be that there's a button on the product that doesn't work. It might be that a new product feature is firing up error messages and customers can't use it. That's stuff you need to size, and you need to be able to show to your business partners, here's how often this is happening, here's the impact it's having, and I need your help fixing it so that my agents don't get these calls anymore. And more importantly, so your customers don't have that bad experience anymore. And then the C is customer. So what I really like about this, I think this is the coolest, shouldn't be the last one, but ABCs, that's how it goes. Customer. What I really like about this is the closed loop use case. So think about a world in which you're getting an effort score, not on the 10% of the interactions where the customer took the time to fill out the survey, but you're getting it 100% of interactions. And then, across the 1,000 calls I did today, here were the 75 or the 100 that were truly high effort awful. Like they were really bad. Now what you can do is proactively close the loop with those customers, because a lot of those customers are not going to take the time to fill out the survey. They're not going to say anything bad to you on social media, but they're in a state of disloyalty anyway. And if you take the time to close the loop with them, to go out and say, hey, send a targeted outreach, an email, a survey to say, hey, based on I know you contacted us earlier today. We know you contacted us earlier today. It doesn't seem like that interaction went as well as either of us would have liked. What went wrong? What can we do better? And what can we do to make this right for you right now? That survey gets a huge response rate because the customer feels like, wow, you heard me. You fumbled the ball and you want to know how to improve it, and I'm going to let you have it. And so that's a great way to forestall that churn and that negative word of mouth to get back to that customer really quickly and show the customer you heard them, but you really heard them at scale, right? The machine identified this, and then you're doing that outreach. So I will stop there on the measurement piece. Scott, I don't know if we have any other measurement questions that we didn't get to, but I want to shift over to coaching and how do we make this stick at kind of a frontline level? Because we did talk about skills and adoption and that kind of thing. And then I saw there was a question earlier about kind of getting everyone on board with this journey. So we can talk about that as well.
Yep. Perfect.
All right. So I'm back. Oh, and by the way, again, I'm happy to talk to anybody offline if you want to learn more about the Tether Effort Index or any of that stuff. So it goes without saying, shoot me a LinkedIn note. We can pick up time later.
I think when I think about making Effortless stick, I think about it from four angles, and you've basically touched on all of them, but you've got QA, you've got your agents or reps, you've got your supervisors and coaching, and then kind of wrapping up all that is a change management component.
Yep.
And there is a question here on coaching, so we'll get to that, and then, like you said, we'll work our way backwards in the chat. I think one of the words you mentioned when you were talking about the call listening piece was when you can have reps listen to a call from a high performing rep, it makes it more concrete. And I think that's one of the key pieces of all this, to make these skills, to make these competencies concrete and tangible. Because it is one thing to talk about advocacy, it is one thing to talk about active listening, but to be able to break it down in a prescriptive manner, to say, Matt, Scott, I know that you know what listening is, but let me break down the 4 to 5 components of what active listening is, so then you can replicate that on each and every call as needed.
Yep.
You know what it's like to advocate for a customer. Sure, we know what advocacy means, but let's break it down and be prescriptive as to what specifically you can do, and things you can say and actions you can take that truly demonstrate that you are advocating for a customer. And I think that's one of the things that oftentimes organizations and people accidentally kind of skip over. It's, we teach advocacy in onboarding, or we teach active listening. You do, and that's fair. What we find in our work and our research is that it often doesn't stick. And I think the reason why it doesn't stick is because it's not concrete, like you mentioned, it's not tangible. And it becomes incredibly important, especially at that agent level, to teach things in this tangible manner, to say, hey, look, you just listen to Matt, take that call. He's one of the best when it comes to advocacy. Let's take you to this training program or whatever you want to call it, where we then teach you what advocacy means and how you break it down and how you can apply it, like Matt just did on that call.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I'll mention at the agent level. At the supervisor level, right, this is where coaching comes into play. You and I both know, we've learned over the years that coaching is a critical component to making Effortless stick. The ability to coach in the right manner. And it's more so, I would say, along how you coach, right? We've created a framework back in the CED days that is 100% applicable in the customer service and contact center environment and leads to those low effort skills. And it has to do with quality over quantity, right? It's so many times supervisors go, oh, I'm doing everything. And listen, it's fair. I think fair feedback that supervisors have a lot on their plates. And unfortunately, coaching kind of falls by the wayside. Coaching becomes things like a wellness conversation, or let's go grab coffee and see how the weekend was. All good things. It's just that that's not coaching.
Right.
And so with the Effortless framework, it's about the quality of the time. It's about truly getting to the root cause of issues. And then that system of those scheduled one-on-ones that we have already alongside the integrated coaching sessions or those side-by-side sessions. And that's where the rubber hits the road. And we can get into some details there. But I think Andrew's comments here, we'll get to the change management piece in just a second. But while we're talking about supervisors and coaching, Andrew's question, I sense that coaching is more important than training per se in this space in terms of making it stick consistently. And therefore the coach team leader community is a key audience to engage effectively. Here's the last thing that I'll say about that, because I think he's 100% correct and certainly want your opinion. I've had multiple organizations tell me in one way or another that the supervisor role is the most critical role in the contact center or customer service function, but also the least valued and the least invested in it. Mm-hmm. And I think we see that all of the time. It's a really strange world, right? And I don't know if we take a second to think about it very often, where you go from being an individual contributor who likely is a high performer, gets promoted to a supervisor role, and all of a sudden you have 18 direct reports. And oh, by the way, just kind of go figure it out. It's a challenging role. And oh, by the way, sorry, I should have had one more. Oh, and oh, by the way, people are going to ask you about, you have to talk about wellness and performance management things and all these things in addition to coaching. It's a tough gig. And I do think, Andrew, to your point, when it comes to making Effortless stick, it is critical that supervisors have the ability to coach correctly, coach consistently, because that is a key to making these Effortless skills stick.
Yeah, so a couple of thoughts just on coaching. We've studied the impact of coaching in other domain areas, sales in particular. And what we find time and time again, as Scott said, coaching is the biggest lever for generating higher levels of performance with your frontline folks, whether those are salespeople, whether those are contact center agents. It is like the lever. It trumps almost anything. It trumps comp. It trumps tech investments. It trumps everything. An engaged supervisor who, in this case, who knows how to coach, is the most powerful lever at your disposal. But as Scott said, it's one that we unfortunately take for granted, or I think we just assume people will figure this out. They're now supervisors and they know part of their job is to coach. I think what we tend to find in coaching is that it often devolves into, and some of this is because of the press of time and how time pressed our supervisors are and how many balls they have in the air at any given time. But you see it kind of fall apart in a couple of ways. I think the first thing is that you find supervisors don't coach, because coaching is about developing the behaviors known to drive success. They turn into spreadsheet coaches or really actually performance managers. And by the way, performance management is a job of the supervisor. It's a critical job, but there's a difference between coaching and performance management. And I think when it devolves into spreadsheet coaching, did you do this? Do you do this? Do you do this? Yes, no, tick box kind of stuff. It's not about sitting down and having that conversation Scott was just talking about advocacy. Let's look at, here was a call where you hid behind policy, use powerless help language. Let's listen to another call where you use advocacy. Listen to a couple examples from our best reps. Let's talk about, why this worked and this didn't work over here. And let's brainstorm some ways that we can get better at this. And let's set some goals across the next week before we meet again about how you're going to think about using these skills. What are the things you're going to listen, the trigger points that make you want to hide behind policy. Let's talk about that. Let's recognize that. Let's use active listening. Now let's talk about the alternatives. Let's avoid the situation where the knee-jerk reaction is I can't do that. And instead the knee-jerk reaction is let's see what we can do together. By the way, there's lots of different ways to talk, to demonstrate that skill. What comes naturally to you? Let's talk about your personality and what you feel comfortable saying. We don't want this to feel scripted, so those are coaching conversations, not, did you do this thing and your handle time was this and, boom, boom, boom. And you didn't think that, we had 10% of your calls, you didn't thank the customer for her loyalty. That's not what we're talking about. That's a different thing. The second way coaching tends to fall apart is I think our supervisors, because they get a little bit, I think, focused on hitting the numbers in terms of coaching interactions per rep, per month, or per week. And they're just kind of checking the box. And I think actually, if you look at the best, the way the best supervisors deploy coaching or use coaching to boost the performance of their team and the engagement of their team, they don't do it democratically. And so what we found in multiple studies is that coaching has the greatest impact on the core of the frontline population. So the middle of the distribution curve. It has less impact at the left-hand tail, the lower performers. That ends up being more of a performance management conversation. And it has a different impact at the other tail, the high performers. There we coach for engagement. We're talking about career pathing. We're talking about, new challenges and new opportunities and things like that. We're not talking so much about using advocacy because they're already at a mastery level of that skill, but we still coach, but we do it for a different purpose. It can be more career coaching or that sort of thing, career planning. So, but where it has the greatest lift is in the middle. That is our biggest opportunity to shift the performance of a team or of an organization. And what I find is that supervisors, what they end up doing is they skew their time spent towards the tails. So instead of coaching the middle, they coach the low performers because those are the ones dragging down their team. Yep. And then they coach the high performers because that's fun. They remind them of themselves, right? It's fun to coach a high performer who's doing everything right, and just, hang out and talk about the weekend and, let's, wellness, stuff like that, family, all great stuff to Scott's point, but that's not coaching. So again, getting focused on the difference in coaching and performance management, and then thinking about how do we liberate our supervisors so that they can coach undemocratically and deploy that time where it will generate the best lift for the organization.
2 cents I just want to add there, and then we can talk about the change management piece and get to Cheryl's question. Is you mentioned, you were talking about spreadsheet coaching and the conversation that should take place, and we could probably take 8 hours and talk about coaching, but I think this is a critical and important point, right? Spreadsheet coaching and what you and I are talking about, vastly different conversations.
Yeah.
I mean, incredibly different conversations, right? Versus, hey, here are the red, yellow, greens, go fix your reds, we'll talk in a week. Versus, to your point, hey, let's listen to some calls, and because you haven't been an advocate recently. Let's listen to some calls because you picked up this nasty habit of talking over customers recently. Let's come to an agreement on these 2 development opportunities that you are going to work on over the next couple of weeks, so that when we meet again, we'll see what has changed. And then you bake in that side-by-side coaching that happens over those 2 weeks. Again, that's where the rubber hits the road. That's where you are able to reinforce the right behaviors and continue to fix the development opportunities that you identified in your one-on-ones. Yep. The other piece that I'll throw out there, Matt, is a lot of times when I talk to companies around coaching, they may say things like, oh, I think we're actually kind of okay. We ran a survey and our agents feel like they're getting pretty good coaching. And oftentimes what I find is that this is a situation where agents don't know what they don't know. Meaning they might think they're receiving pretty good coaching because in reality, they've never received good coaching. So they think just because you stop by their desk to say hello, how'd the weekend go? Let's grab a coffee. That, hey, that's coffee. That's coaching. My supervisor cares. when in reality, that's just kind of checking in and seeing how everybody's doing. And so one of the things that I would encourage organizations to do as they think about coaching in the new year is to really get a sense of, are we doing this correctly? How is it affecting my agents? And if we are listening to our agents in this regard, do they really understand what good coaching looks like?
Yeah, that's really well said, Scott. And, this is something, and I don't want to correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is something that Challenger Inc. can help companies with, is deploying a pulse survey or a coaching effectiveness survey, but it's not, are you getting coaching? What do you think of it? And then people, because they've never seen good coaching, are like, oh yeah, I'm getting coached, that's great. But instead asking questions that we know are representative of the attributes of good coaching. Are you feeling your supervisor's doing this? Are they doing that? And it's laying out specifically the things we know great coaches and great supervisors do. And then asking the rep, are these the things that you're receiving or not? As opposed to just asking generically, are you being coached and do you think it's any good?
This is 100% where we at Challenger play, right? Making sure that agents have the low effort skills, right? The knowledge of them, the ability to apply them on every call, the ability for these supervisors to have the skills to coach effectively and consistently, and to have QA kind of wrap it all up. That's 100% where we play. So you're right there. I think the last piece that I'll mention here is I referenced the fourth leg of the three-legged stool, if you will, is the change management piece.
Yeah.
What I tend to find, I think this will be a good segue into Cheryl's question, is no matter the organization, whether we're talking a small organization or a large organization, whether we're talking about an organization that is new to Effortless or has read the book a few times and heard you speak a few times, this is a significant change for almost everyone.
Yeah.
Right. It might not be for some of the leaders at the organization because they've been around a little while and they've seen you speak or whatever it may be. But for the entire organization, from the leaders on down to the entry level reps, this is a significant shift. And what we've come to learn is that the ability to plan for this shift, the ability to think about, hey, what's in it for you, rep? What's in it for you, supervisor? To account for, hey, you as a leader, you play a role in ensuring that this works. Here's the important piece that you play, and here are the questions you should be asking when your rep comes out of a class. Hey, what'd you learn today? What are you going to do differently? To recognize that, listen, you as a leader can very easily put the kibosh on all this if you aren't bought into it. Those are the things that become critical in ensuring that Effortless sticks. You've got to have that excitement early on, that buy-in early on, and there's got to be a way, and again, this is something we work on with organizations all the time. How do you ensure that excitement continues throughout so it does not become a flavor of the day?
Yeah, agreed. I did want to share as well, just from change management perspective, this is I think it's a very smart idea that we learned yesterday. I mentioned our customer, Seth Stewart, who's a leader in customer experience and customer service at MetTel. We did a session here at CCW, and we're talking about effectively change management and how to accomplish this in a large scale organization, and kind of how do you kind of keep the momentum and avoid losing the thread, if you will, on an effort journey, because it is a journey, it is a big change, and it takes a long time. And I think what he said was really interesting, and it's probably something that many of us know but forget, which is this is a multifaceted thing, right? We're talking about frontline skills. We're talking about measurement changes. We're talking about, by the way, even within frontline skills, we're talking about a whole myriad of skills we're now asking our reps to stop doing and start doing. We're talking about changes on digital. We're talking about a mindset shift. We're talking about all this stuff. And I think it can be a little bit overwhelming. And I think one of the biggest mistakes we see companies make is they try to take on the whole thing at once. They kind of boil the ocean and drive all this change. We're going to change our metrics and our bonus structure and all our frontline skills and our training, and we're going to get our supervisors coaching, and I'm going to get a leadership team focusing on this. I'm going to work with my business partners. And now we care about this thing. We don't care about anything else. And I think what Seth said, I thought was really powerful. He said, look, we're in an effort reduction journey. And if I just look at the frontline skills component, he said, what we didn't do is go out and say, hey, stop doing all these other things and start just doing all these effort skills and try to move the entire organization on every dimension. What we did instead was we picked a skill and we focused on it for a month. And he said, so he said, we started with advocacy because one of our problems was, and we had data on this, is when we say we can't do something, which unfortunately the customer asks us to do things that we just can't do. And our knee-jerk reaction is to say no. And so we thought about what's a better way to do it. It's a better way to be an advocate. We were able to do all that coaching and prove to the reps, here's why it matters, show them like good versus bad, and really make it relevant for them and personalized to them. But he said, then we just stayed focused on that. And we said, keep doing all the other stuff, but this is the one thing we want to focus on this month. And they ran campaigns and contests and who can have the highest percentage use of advocacy across all of their calls. And they had, and they made it really fun. And all the coaching that month was about advocacy. It was really focused in on that. And then after that, they moved to something else. So they moved to positive negative language as the next skill. And they spent a month on that. In same kind of cadence, contests and work groups and team sessions and all the coaching, all the focus was on positive language and eliminating negative language and coming up with positive language alternatives. And they'd have lunch and learns and brainstorming sessions, and teams would break out to think about, how do we stop saying this and start, what's the positive language alternative? And they got the team involved. And then the next month they moved on to something else. And what was interesting, he said, when we moved on to the next skill, we didn't see any decline in the previous skill. We focused on that one, we made it stick. And then we moved on to the next one. But what was powerful about it, I think, is they didn't come out and tell their reps like, oh, you want to use positive language, you want to use advocacy, you want to do this and this and this and this, not that other stuff you were doing before. Focus on these 10 things. And it's just, it's a lot to take on, and it can be overwhelming, and it can lead to nothing happening. Or maybe you see like a slight inflection, but people then revert back to what they're doing before. But that focused approach, it's so tempting to take it all on at once, right? But if we get some focus, that's going to lead to much stickier and I'd say like kind of resilient change than if we try to, take on the whole shebang all in one fell swoop.
Yeah, agreed. The other piece I'll mention there is, if you're interested, anyone, there's an interview on the Challenger website. I think it's on YouTube somewhere as well, that I did with Indeed, who's been a client of ours for a few years now, and they have done a spectacular job of just making sure that this thing lives and breathes, and really have gotten creative in ways that I haven't seen other organizations get. So if you're interested, send me a note. You'll find it on the Challenger website, but I would encourage you to check it out. I think it's maybe like a 30 or 40-minute interview there.
Yeah.
Want to get to Cheryl's question?
Cheryl's question. Yeah. That's a great question.
So how do you get everybody else involved in the order fulfillment process? Think about Effortless. And I think we can even maybe take it up a notch to say, how do you get everybody else outside of customer service or the contact center to think about Effortless?
So here's one thing I was saying. I hear this personally all the time, which is as like customer effort score guy, the number of customers I've spoken to where the conversation goes, are you familiar with this? Yeah, we're familiar with it. But we're not a customer effort score shop. We're an NPS shop, or we're a CSAT shop. And so what I think is really important is that it can be easy to kind of opt out of the journey by saying, oh, no, we do something else. But if you ask the question a little bit differently, which is, okay, you're an NPS shop, you're a CSAT shop, but do you care about being easier to do business with for your customers? The answer to that question is 100% yes, for every customer I've ever spoken to, every practitioner, every executive. And I think that can be true of our internal partners too. They're measured on different things. They have different objectives, OKRs, MBOs, metrics, bonus plans, you name it. Just because customer effort score or tether effort index or whatever is your metric, and that's a thing you're focused on, they may not adopt that. They may not see the relevance. They're not going to get paid their bonus by lowering your effort scores or improving your effort scores. Get them focused on the bigger objective, which is making it easier for the customer to do business with your company. So with the product team, how do we make sure, not that you help me get a better effort score or TEI index score to hit my bonus, but how do we create a situation in which we create a really easy to use product? We make the installation process easy. The unboxing experience is easy. The user experience is easy. Because we know an easy experience leads to fewer complaints, less customer churn, more customers who want to spend more money about us, more customers who say great things about us. Like, that's in everybody's interest. And by the way, it helps out my team too, because they don't like dealing with these issues that are high effort for the customer. That's no fun. And, we're having a lot of churn right now in the service organization. So you can help me But more importantly, we can all help our customers by being focused on this bigger objective of being easy to do business with. Forget effort score, forget TI. That's your thing. Great if you get senior level buy-in for that at an executive level, wonderful. But that's not necessary. What's necessary is you get the broader buy-in that making things easier, whether it's an easier store visit, an easier product experience, easier sales conversation, marketing campaigns and offers that are easier to understand, a website that's easier to navigate, and a service experience that's low effort, that's in everybody's interest. And so get your business partners focused on that. You will get very little pushback on it. And I think starting that with this is something we're really focused on in our service organization, is making the service experience easier. We've identified a number of things that create high effort, that create friction for our customers. Some of those we can't control. So we need your help solving those things, because surely you agree making it easy for the customer is job one. We've got to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. The way I look at it is education, right? Educating those folks on ease rather than effortless. And I've heard plenty of stories where organizations will buy their fellow leaders the book, right?
Yep.
And say, hey, look, this is what we're trying to do. I think education is a huge piece, because this is a challenge, right? We can control what we can control, which is usually customer service and customer support and contact centers.
Yep.
And we can try to influence as much as possible. And I think education goes a long way, because I think you're right. Everybody can buy into easy experiences. Everybody can read the book and go, hey, I'm a consumer myself. I totally get what Matt was writing about here. And I think that goes a tremendous way. And if we get into the nitty gritty or the nuances here, I've done a number of keynotes, Matt, you do plenty more than I do, but to be able to then get on the horn with these folks for an hour, whether that's in person or virtually these days, and go through the keynote and explain, where this came from and why it's so important, that starts to create that buy-in and excitement as well. I mean, I joke all the time and with you about the most excited you tend to see people is after one of your, keynotes that you give on Effortless, right? People are motivated, they're excited. And I think that holds true no matter the function, 100%. And the challenge there is, and part of the education, I think, is the end of the day, you're only as strong as your weakest link. And so it becomes important for everyone in that value stream, if you will. They're ultimately delivering something to the customer, and the ability to do it easily, I think will wind up being important to everyone.
You're right. And the other thing we have to think about it, engaging our business partners. We've got to speak their language. So the Effortless experience, what's been interesting to me in that journey with that book, which we've been talking about now for 6 modules, is how it's been picked up as a concept by teams well beyond the contact center. I presented this to internal IT help desks who want to know, how do we deliver better end user support? I presented this to teams of HR business partners who want to know, how do we make the delivery of our support to our internal business partners easier? I presented this to heads of HR who care about delivering an easy employee experience, or an easy employee onboarding experience, or an easier review process, or whatever it is. This is product teams who care about designing easier to use products. This is a broad concept, but we still need to bring the data that's relevant to them. So think about a product team. We can talk about Effortless. We want to guard against them saying, yeah, that was data on the contact center. Where it hits home with them is when we can show them, when I look at the most common, if I look at the high effort interactions we're having, whether you use customer effort score or you use tether effort index, and then I look at some of the product reasons, we find that this issue with our product is something that drives a lot of high effort calls. By the way, let me show you this data. High effort customers don't stay as long, they churn out at a higher rate, they don't buy as much, and they say bad things about us. So I need your help fixing that, but that's a product issue, and then I can quantify it. So having that ability to quantify it, we're not trying to get them to fight our battles for us, but we're trying to get them bought in to do their part in this broader objective of being easier to do business with. But we got to bring that data. We got to speak their language. We got to show them specifically, these are the things that I need your help with, and this is how much it hurts when we don't fix those things. We got to make it real for them.
It's a great point. And I always think, I think we talked earlier in one of the other sessions, and if we have any reformed IT people on the line like myself, the old language used to be, we're up 4 nines or 5 nines, and you get someone in the business going, what does that mean? I don't know what that means. So I think it's a great point. I think it's a fantastic point. Let's do this. We've got just a few minutes left. I think we tackled all the questions. Let me just double check. Why don't we do this? Let's give everyone a whole 2 minutes back, so they can get on to the next meeting. For those of you out in Vegas, you can get back to the floor. I want to wish everyone a safe, restful, enjoyable holiday. Matt and I think have some exciting things going on in the new year, so we'll hopefully see you then. As always, please find us on LinkedIn if you haven't already. And thanks again for joining us for the last 6 weeks. I've had a blast doing this with Matt, and we'll see you next year.
Yeah, thanks
everyone.
Everybody. Happy New Year, happy holidays to you. Stay safe out there. And again, as Scott said, thank you so much for your investment of time and your team's time. And use these recordings. They'll be available for a long time, so you can book club can live on even if there's not a modules. So again, thanks so much for your commitment, and best wishes.